It started as just another day for Marine James Jimmy Carter. Disabled from the line of duty, he never expected a simple trip to the grocery store would change his life forever. But that day, Mockery found him. The whispers, the sneers, the cruel laughter. No one should ever endure that. And just as quickly as it started, something changed. The kind of change you couldn't take back. What happened next? Let's just say, the Navy SEALs had a very special way of making people regret their actions. Stay with us to hear the story you'll never forget. James Carter, or Jimmy to his friends, had always been the kind of person who gave everything for his country. A proud Marine, he had served multiple tours overseas, always putting the mission first. But that all changed when an IED explosion left him with permanent disabilities, forcing him into early retirement. Back home in a small town, he tried to live a quiet life, away from the noise of his past. He was a man of routine, daily walks with his dog, trips to the local grocery store, and visits to his old unit. He didn't ask for sympathy. All he wanted was respect. Yet, in his heart, he knew people often saw his wheelchair before they saw him. That particular afternoon, Jimmy was on his usual run to the grocery store. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft glow over the town. His dog trotted beside him as he wheeled himself through the automatic doors of the market. It was an ordinary day, or so he thought. But as he made his way down the aisles, Jimmy could feel eyes on him. Whispers swirled in the background, and it wasn't long before he could hear a voice, a loud mocking voice, cutting through the hum of the store. "Look at that, a Marine in a wheelchair. What a joke." Jimmy froze. He tried to ignore the words, but the laughter that followed made it impossible. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd been mocked for his disabilities, but something about this moment felt different. It wasn't just the words, it was the venom in them. He looked over to find the source of the laughter, a group of men in their late 20s, clearly more interested in making fun of him than shopping. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know the battles he'd faced, both on the battlefield and within himself. They didn't know how hard it was to live with a disability after being a man of action. Jimmy didn't speak up. He didn't argue. He just continued his shopping. But that day, something inside him shifted. Something was about to change. As Jimmy continued down the aisles, he could feel the men's eyes following him. Their jeers seemed to echo louder with each step, each cruel comment designed to chip away at his dignity. But he kept his head down, focusing on the list in his hand, trying to escape the tension that was building in the air. Then, out of nowhere, one of the men stepped forward. "Hey Jimmy, you sure that chair's not slowing you down? Maybe you should stick to the home front, huh?" His words were sharp, meant to sting. The others snickered, egging him on. Jimmy felt his stomach tighten. He had faced worse on the battlefield. He had seen the worst humanity could offer in the form of war. But this felt different. It was personal. It wasn't a soldier taunting him, it was a civilian, someone who hadn't lived through the horrors he had. And that made it sting even more. He took a deep breath. His hand gripped the wheels of his chair tighter. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. The store around them seemed to fade into the background. It was just him and the group of men. "Don't you have anything better to do?" Jimmy muttered, not looking up. His voice was low, but firm. The man who had mocked him just laughed. "What's the matter, old man? Are you going to cry? You got no fight left in you." And that's when it happened. Without warning, a voice boomed from the back of the store, cutting through the tension like a knife. "That's enough." The store went silent. Jimmy's heart skipped a beat as he looked toward the source of the voice. Standing at the entrance, flanked by two other men, was a Navy SEAL. His uniform was sharp, his posture imposing. It was clear by the way the group of men recoiled that they recognized the man and the power he held. "Apologize," the SEAL demanded, his voice unwavering. He took a step forward, his eyes locked on the group of men who had been mocking Jimmy. They looked like they might run, but the man didn't back down. "You're not going anywhere until you make it right." The tension was palpable. The group of men hesitated, glancing at each other, their confidence slipping away. But the SEAL didn't budge. And then, in a move that caught everyone off guard, he turned to Jimmy. "Is he bothering you, sir?" he asked, his tone now respectful, his gaze steady. Jimmy looked up. The last thing he expected was for someone to have his back in this moment. His mind raced, the words of the mocking men still echoing in his head. But now, here was a person who didn't judge him based on his disability. This was someone who saw him for who he truly was. "Yes," Jimmy said, his voice gaining strength. "They were." The Navy SEAL nodded and stepped forward, the rest of his group following suit. The men who had mocked Jimmy now stood frozen in place, the fear in their eyes visible to everyone in the store. What they hadn't realized was that their words had provoked something far greater than they could handle. And that's when Jimmy realized, this wasn't just about him anymore. This was bigger than an apology. It was about standing up against the mockery, the ridicule, and the injustice faced by countless people who had been looked down upon, just like him. The SEALs were here. And the real lesson was about to unfold. As the tension in the store grew, the Navy SEAL stepped forward with unwavering authority. He turned to face the group of mocking men, now visibly uneasy. His voice was low but full of strength, and every word he spoke carried the weight of his experience. "You're not just disrespecting him," the SEAL said, "you're disrespecting every person who fought for this country, every person who has made sacrifices for freedom. You don't get to mock a hero like that." The group of men fell silent, their eyes darting between each other. They could feel the weight of their actions settling in, but they still refused to apologize. The humiliation on their faces was evident, but it wasn't just because of the Navy SEAL standing before them, it was because they knew they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Jimmy's hands trembled as he gripped the wheels of his chair. This wasn't the response he'd expected. The store, once full of mocking voices, had now gone completely quiet, with every shopper watching the standoff unfold. But something inside him clicked. He wasn't just a victim anymore. With the SEALs standing beside him, he felt something he hadn't in years: strength. The SEAL didn't back down, and neither did Jimmy. "They need to learn," the SEAL said, turning to Jimmy. "They need to understand what it means to disrespect a man who has given everything for his country." Jimmy nodded, the anger within him transforming into something more powerful: pride. These men weren't just apologizing to him. They were apologizing to everyone who had ever been looked down upon because of their appearance, their background, or their abilities. The SEALs' intervention wasn't just about one man's honor. It was about standing up for every marginalized person who had been made to feel less than. After what felt like an eternity, the leader of the group of men finally muttered an apology. His voice was small, defeated. "Sorry, man. We didn't mean it. It was wrong." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jimmy's heart swelled with a sense of justice that had long been absent. In that moment, he realized the power of solidarity, the strength that came from standing together against injustice. The world didn't have to stay the same. Change could happen when people chose to stand up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. But the real twist came when the leader of the group, having muttered his half-hearted apology, made a fatal mistake. The man's friends, still uneasy and humiliated, began to murmur under their breath. They were ashamed, but something else lingered in the air. The SEAL could sense it, his posture sharpening as he prepared for what was next. "You think that's enough?" the SEAL said, his voice now colder, sharper. "You think an apology erases your actions? Apologies don't fix things. They're the beginning, but not the end." The leader of the group stumbled backward, his eyes widening. But before he could speak, the Navy SEAL motioned for Jimmy to follow him. Jimmy wheeled himself forward, a quiet resolve settling in his chest. "Do you see now?" the SEAL continued, looking at the young men. "Do you see how easy it was to break this man? How you took his dignity with a few words?" The group of men, now completely subdued, nodded slowly. But they couldn't shake the feeling of guilt, the realization that their words had caused more harm than they could ever undo. Then, with a calm, deliberate voice, the SEAL dropped the hammer. "This isn't the end for you. It's just the beginning. I want you to remember this moment. Next time you mock someone, next time you think it's okay to make someone feel less than human, remember Jimmy." The store fell completely silent. Every word the SEAL spoke felt like a deep echo in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. In that moment, Jimmy was no longer just a man in a wheelchair. He was a symbol of strength, of perseverance, and of the deep respect that all people, no matter their background, deserved. And those men? They had just learned a hard lesson they wouldn't soon forget. As Jimmy left the store, the weight of the moment stayed with him. He had fought battles before, ones where the stakes were life and death, but this one felt different. This one was personal. This one was about his humanity, about standing up to the mockery and the disrespect that he had faced for years. The Navy SEAL had given him more than just support that day. He had given him something Jimmy hadn't known he needed: belief in himself. The lesson wasn't just about the apology the men had given. It was about understanding that no one, no matter how vulnerable they appeared, should ever have to tolerate disrespect. And as Jimmy wheeled himself to his car, he reflected on what had just happened. The truth was clear: standing up to injustice wasn't always easy, but it was always necessary. When we stay silent, we let the darkness of racism and hatred grow. But when we speak out, when we stand together, we show the world that we won't let hatred win. As for the men who had mocked him, they would never forget that day. They would never forget the lesson they had learned, one they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. But the bigger question remained: how many more people out there were still being silenced, still being mocked, still being made to feel small? When would the world finally listen to those who had been oppressed for so long? Jimmy didn't have the answer, but he knew one thing: it was a fight worth having. And it was one that wasn't over yet. This section wraps up the emotional tension and provides a strong takeaway. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. What happened to Jimmy could happen to any one of us, and it's a reminder that standing up for what's right, no matter how difficult, is a choice we all must make. We want to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever experienced something similar? Or maybe you've witnessed an injustice that needs to be heard. Drop a comment below and share your story with us. Let's continue this conversation, because when we speak up, change can happen. And don't forget, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue sharing important stories that make a difference. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release our next powerful video. Like the video, share with someone who needs to hear this, and let's stand together against injustice. Together, we can amplify these stories and make a lasting impact. Don't miss out on the next video. Subscribe now and be part of the change. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.